In the summer of 2018, two siblings from Portland, Oregon, set out for what they believed would be a simple 3-day hiking adventure in the remote wilderness of the North Cascades. 26-year-old Jake Brennan and his younger sister, 24-year-old Amy Brennan, were experienced hikers who had explored trails across the Pacific Northwest for years. They planned to document their journey through the untouched valleys near Glacier Peak, an area known for its pristine beauty and challenging terrain. 4 years would pass before the forest revealed what had happened to them, and when it did, investigators would uncover something that defied every logical explanation they could imagine. On July 15, 2018, Jake and Amy Brennan arrived in the small mountain town of Darrington, Washington, population barely 800. The town served as a gateway to some of the most remote wilderness areas in the state, where dense forests stretched for miles without a single road or trail marker. The siblings checked into the Mountain View Lodge, a modest establishment that catered primarily to serious hikers and climbers. The desk clerk, Linda Hoffman, later recalled that both seemed well prepared and confident. Jake carried a large hiking pack with professional gear, while Amy had a smaller pack and a high-end camera around her neck. They asked about permits for the restricted areas near Glacier Peak and mentioned they wanted to reach a location called Devil's Backbone, a narrow ridge that offered spectacular views but required advanced hiking skills to access safely. According to Linda's statement, the siblings studied topographic maps for over an hour in the lodge's common area. They marked several waypoints with a red pen and discussed water sources and potential camping spots. Jake mentioned they had enough supplies for 5 days, though they planned to return in 3. Amy was particularly interested in photographing the alpine meadows that bloomed briefly during the summer months. She showed Linda some of her previous work on her camera, images of mountain landscapes that demonstrated real skill and artistic vision. Both siblings appeared relaxed and excited about their upcoming adventure. They paid for 2 nights at the lodge and said they would check out early the next morning. The weather forecast for the region was favorable, with clear skies and temperatures in the 70s during the day, dropping to the 40s at night. Perfect conditions for hiking and camping. Jake had registered their planned route with the local ranger station, providing detailed information about their intended path and expected return date. The route would take them through old-growth forest, across several creek crossings, and up to the alpine zone where few people ventured. It was challenging but well within the capabilities of experienced hikers like the Brennan siblings. On the morning of July 16, Jake and Amy left the lodge at 6:30. Several people saw them loading their packs into Jake's blue Toyota pickup truck. They drove to the trailhead at Buck Creek Pass, about 40 minutes from town on a winding Forest Service road. The parking area was empty except for one other vehicle, which belonged to a day hiker who had started much earlier. Jake's truck was found there 3 days later, locked and undisturbed, with no signs of trouble. The trail they chose was known as the Ptarmigan Ridge Route, a demanding path that climbed steadily through dense forest before emerging into open meadows and rocky terrain. The first few miles followed a well-maintained trail, but after that hikers had to rely on cairns and their own navigation skills. The area was known for sudden weather changes and difficult terrain that could challenge even experienced outdoors enthusiasts. Cell phone coverage was non-existent beyond the first mile, and the nearest road was more than 20 miles away through rugged wilderness. When Jake and Amy failed to return by their planned date of July 18, Linda Hoffman at the lodge became concerned. She had expected them to check out that morning, but their room remained empty and their belongings untouched. She called the number Jake had provided, but it went straight to voicemail. By evening, when there was still no word, she contacted the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office to report the overdue hikers. Sheriff Deputy Robert Kane took the initial report and immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation. The area where the siblings had planned to hike was notorious for its challenging conditions and limited access for rescue operations. He contacted the local search and rescue coordinator and began organizing a response team. The search would begin at first light the following morning, but everyone involved knew that time was critical in wilderness emergencies. The initial search team consisted of 12 volunteers from the Snohomish County Search and Rescue Unit, along with 2 deputies and a helicopter crew from the State Patrol. They began at the Buck Creek Pass trailhead, where Jake's truck sat in the small gravel parking area. The vehicle was thoroughly examined but revealed no clues about what might have happened. The doors were locked, the keys were missing, and personal items like wallets and phones were nowhere to be found, suggesting the siblings had taken everything with them as planned. Search dogs were brought in to track the siblings' scent from the parking area. The dogs immediately picked up a trail leading into the forest along the established path. For the first 3 miles, the scent was strong and consistent, indicating that Jake and Amy had followed the normal route without deviation. The trail was well marked in this section, and several other hikers had used it recently, but the dogs were able to distinguish the specific scents they were following. At the 3-mile mark, where the maintained trail ended and the route became more challenging, the dogs began to show confusion. The scent seemed to scatter in multiple directions, as if the hikers had spent considerable time in the area, possibly setting up camp or exploring different options. Search teams spread out to cover all possible routes, but the terrain became increasingly difficult. Steep slopes, dense undergrowth, and loose rock made progress slow and dangerous. By the end of the first day, searchers had covered approximately 8 square miles of wilderness without finding any trace of the missing siblings. No camping gear, no footprints in the soft soil near water sources, no pieces of clothing or equipment. It was as if Jake and Amy had simply vanished into the vast forest. The helicopter crew reported no signs of distress signals or bright-colored gear that might be visible from above. The search continued for 2 weeks, with teams working in rotating shifts to cover as much ground as possible. Volunteers came from across the state to help, including experienced mountaineers and wilderness guides who knew the area intimately. They checked every possible route, every potential camping spot, every creek crossing and ridge line. The weather remained favorable throughout the search period, eliminating the possibility that the siblings had been caught in a sudden storm. As days passed without any discoveries, theories began to emerge about what might have happened. Some suggested that Jake and Amy had become lost and wandered into even more remote areas, possibly crossing into adjacent wilderness zones where search efforts had not yet reached. Others wondered if they had suffered an accident, perhaps a fall or injury that left them unable to signal for help. The most troubling possibility was that they had encountered some kind of foul play, though the remote location made this seem unlikely. Family members arrived from Portland to assist with the search efforts and provide additional information about the siblings' experience and habits. Their parents, David and Susan Brennan, described Jake and Amy as careful and well-prepared hikers who always followed safety protocols. They carried emergency beacons, first aid supplies, and enough food and water for extended trips. Neither had any history of reckless behavior or poor judgment in outdoor situations. The official search was scaled back after 2 weeks, though it was never formally called off. The case remained open, and periodic searches were conducted whenever new information or tips were received. Jake and Amy Brennan were added to the National Database of Missing Persons, and their photographs were distributed to ranger stations and outdoor recreation businesses throughout the region. Months passed without any new developments in the case of the missing Brennan siblings. The autumn of 2018 brought early snow to the high country, effectively ending any possibility of ground searches until the following spring. Jake's blue Toyota pickup remained in the impound lot at the sheriff's office, a silent reminder of the mystery that had consumed so much time and resources. The case file grew thicker with reports, witness statements, and search logs, but no actual evidence of what had happened to the 2 experienced hikers. David and Susan Brennan refused to give up hope. They established a reward fund and hired a private investigator, former Seattle Police Detective Raymond Walsh, to continue looking for their children. Walsh spent weeks in Darrington interviewing locals and retracing the search efforts. He examined every piece of evidence multiple times and developed several theories, but none led to concrete results. The detective's report, filed in December 2018, concluded that the siblings had most likely suffered some kind of accident in terrain so remote that their bodies might never be recovered. The winter of 2018 to 2019 was particularly harsh in the North Cascades. Heavy snowfall and freezing temperatures made the wilderness areas completely inaccessible to searchers. Any evidence that might have existed on the surface would now be buried under several feet of snow and ice. The Brennan family held a memorial service in Portland that February, though they stopped short of having their children declared legally dead. Susan Brennan told reporters that she would never stop believing her children might still be alive somewhere. Spring brought renewed search efforts, but they were limited in scope. The official search and rescue budget had been exhausted, and volunteer organizations could only commit resources for a few weekend operations. These searches focused on areas that had been inaccessible during the previous summer due to snow or dangerous conditions. Teams checked remote valleys, hidden caves, and steep ravines where injured hikers might have taken shelter. Once again they found nothing. As 2019 progressed into 2020, the case gradually faded from public attention. Occasional newspaper articles marked the anniversary of the disappearance, and the family continued to maintain a website with information about Jake and Amy, but new leads became increasingly rare. The COVID-19 pandemic further reduced search activities, as volunteer organizations suspended operations and travel restrictions limited access to remote areas. Detective Walsh continued his investigation on a reduced basis, following up on tips and conducting periodic searches of areas he considered most promising. He developed a particular interest in the theory that the siblings might have deviated from their planned route and ended up in a completely different drainage system. The North Cascades contain numerous parallel valleys separated by high ridges, and it was possible for even experienced hikers to become disoriented and follow the wrong creek downstream. In the summer of 2021, Walsh organized a small search expedition to explore some of these alternative routes. Using his own funds and a few dedicated volunteers, he spent a week examining areas that had received little attention during the original search. The team found some interesting geological features and wildlife sign, but no trace of human presence. Walsh's final report, submitted to the Brennan family in September 2021, recommended that future search efforts focus on areas at least 10 miles from the original planned route. The case might have remained unsolved indefinitely if not for an unrelated incident that occurred in the spring of 2022. A team of geological surveyors working for the U.S. Forest Service was conducting a mineral assessment in a remote section of the Glacier Peak Wilderness. The survey required them to access areas that had never been systematically explored, using helicopter transport to reach locations that would have taken days to reach on foot. Dr. Patricia Novak, the lead geologist on the survey team, was examining rock formations in a narrow canyon approximately 15 miles northeast of where Jake and Amy had originally planned to hike. The canyon was hidden between two steep ridges and was not visible from any established trail or viewpoint. It could only be accessed by rappelling down a cliff face or by following a treacherous route through loose rock and dense vegetation. On May 12, 2022, while collecting rock samples near the bottom of the canyon, Dr. Novak noticed something unusual among the boulders and fallen trees. What initially appeared to be a piece of weathered wood turned out to be part of a synthetic material, possibly from outdoor gear. She called her team members over to examine the find, and they quickly realized they were looking at the remains of a camping tent, badly damaged by years of exposure to the elements. The discovery was immediately reported to the Forest Service headquarters, and within hours, sheriff's deputies and search and rescue personnel were being transported to the site by helicopter. The canyon was so remote and difficult to access that it had never been included in any of the previous search grids. Even experienced searchers familiar with the area had not known of its existence. What the investigators found in that hidden canyon would finally answer the question of what had happened to Jake and Amy Brennan, but it would also raise new questions that were far more disturbing than the original mystery. The tent was just the beginning of a discovery that would challenge everything the searchers thought they knew about wilderness survival and human behavior. The canyon itself was a geological anomaly, carved by centuries of water erosion into a narrow gorge with walls rising more than 200 feet on both sides. A small creek ran along the bottom, fed by snowmelt and springs higher up in the mountains. The environment was surprisingly lush, with moss-covered rocks and small trees growing in the limited sunlight that reached the canyon floor. It was like a hidden world, completely isolated from the surrounding wilderness. Near the damaged tent, investigators found the scattered remains of camping equipment. A sleeping bag, torn and faded, was wedged between two large rocks. Metal tent stakes were scattered across a small flat area that appeared to have been used as a campsite. Most significantly, they found a backpack partially buried under fallen leaves and debris. The pack was severely weathered, but still recognizable as high-quality hiking gear. Inside the backpack, wrapped in a plastic bag that had somehow remained waterproof, investigators discovered a journal. The notebook was damp but readable, and the entries were written in a neat handwriting that the Brennan family would later confirm belonged to Amy. The journal contained daily entries starting from July 16, 2018, the day the siblings had begun their hike. The early entries described a normal hiking experience. Amy wrote about the beautiful weather, the challenging terrain, and her excitement about photographing the alpine scenery. She mentioned that they had made good time on the first day and had camped near a small lake that was not marked on their map. The entries suggested that Jake and Amy had been following their planned route and were enjoying their adventure. But on July 18, the day they were supposed to return to Darrington, Amy's journal entries took on a different tone. She wrote about becoming separated from Jake during a difficult creek crossing and spending hours trying to find him. When they finally reunited, they discovered that they had somehow gotten turned around and were no longer sure of their location. Their compass readings didn't match what they expected to see on their topographic map. The journal entries from the following days described increasingly desperate attempts to find their way back to familiar terrain. Jake and Amy had apparently followed what they thought was the correct drainage, but it led them deeper into unknown territory instead of back toward their starting point. They rationed their food and water, expecting to reach a road or trail within a day or two, but the landscape seemed to go on forever without any signs of human presence. If you're fascinated by mysterious disappearances and want to hear more incredible true stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest investigations into the unexplained. By July 22, Amy's handwriting had become less steady and her entries shorter. She wrote about Jake becoming increasingly frustrated and taking longer and longer scouting trips to try to find a way out. They had found the hidden canyon by accident when Jake slipped on loose rock and fell partway down the cliff. Rather than risk trying to climb back up, they had decided to explore the canyon bottom, hoping it might lead to easier terrain. The canyon had seemed like a refuge at first. There was fresh water, some shelter from the weather, and even wild berries growing along the creek. Amy wrote that they had decided to rest for a day or two while Jake recovered from injuries sustained in his fall. But when they tried to leave the canyon, they discovered that the walls were too steep and unstable to climb safely. The route they had used to descend was blocked by a rockfall that had occurred after their arrival. The journal entries from late July revealed the growing desperation of the trapped siblings. Amy wrote about their attempts to signal for help by building smoke fires and arranging rocks in patterns that might be visible from aircraft. But the narrow canyon walls blocked most of the sky, and any smoke was quickly dispersed by wind currents flowing through the gorge. They had tried shouting for hours at a time, but their voices simply echoed off the rock walls without carrying beyond the canyon. Jake had made several dangerous attempts to climb out of the canyon using makeshift ropes fashioned from their climbing gear and torn clothing. Amy described watching in terror as her brother inched his way up the unstable rock face, only to be forced back down when loose stones gave way beneath his hands. On one attempt, he had fallen nearly 30 feet, landing hard on the rocky canyon floor and injuring his left shoulder. After that, Amy had begged him to stop trying to climb out, fearing that he would be killed in the attempt. By early August, their food supplies were nearly exhausted. Amy wrote about surviving on wild berries, edible plants, and occasionally catching small fish from the creek using improvised traps. Jake had become increasingly withdrawn and angry, blaming himself for leading them into the canyon. He spent long hours sitting alone by the water, staring at the walls that had become their prison. Amy tried to maintain their spirits by continuing to take photographs and writing detailed observations about the unique ecosystem they had discovered. The journal entries from mid-August showed signs of physical and mental deterioration. Amy's handwriting became more erratic, and she wrote about experiencing dizzy spells and weakness from malnutrition. Jake had developed a persistent cough that worried her, and his injured shoulder was not healing properly. They had used up their first aid supplies treating various cuts and bruises from their failed escape attempts. Despite their dire situation, Amy continued to document their daily activities and observations about the canyon environment. On August 20th, Amy wrote about discovering something that gave them new hope. While exploring the far end of the canyon, Jake had found what appeared to be an old mining tunnel carved into the rock wall. The tunnel was partially collapsed, but there seemed to be a passage leading deeper into the mountain. They spent several days clearing debris from the entrance, working with their bare hands and improvised tools to widen the opening enough for a person to crawl through. The tunnel exploration began cautiously, with Jake going first while Amy waited at the entrance with their flashlight. The passage was narrow and unstable, with loose rocks that could shift without warning. But after crawling for what felt like hours, Jake had emerged into a larger chamber that appeared to be part of an old mine shaft. More importantly, he could feel air movement that suggested the tunnel system might connect to the surface somewhere else in the mountain. Amy's journal entries from late August described their preparations for what they hoped would be their escape route. They gathered their remaining supplies and equipment, planning to travel light through the tunnel system. Amy wrote about her fears of getting lost underground or being trapped by a cave-in, but she also expressed determination to try anything that might lead them to freedom. They had been trapped in the canyon for more than a month, and both knew they were running out of time. The final journal entry was dated September 3, 2018. Amy wrote that they were about to enter the tunnel system for what they hoped would be their final escape attempt. She mentioned that Jake was feeling stronger after resting for several days, and they had managed to catch enough fish to have a decent meal before their journey. The entry ended with a simple statement that would haunt investigators for years to come. She wrote that if anyone ever found the journal, they should know that she and Jake had tried everything possible to survive and get home to their family. When investigators finished reading Amy's journal, they realized that the siblings had been alive in the canyon for nearly 2 months after their disappearance. The discovery raised immediate questions about the tunnel system that Jake had found and whether it might contain additional evidence about their fate. A technical rescue team was assembled to explore the mining tunnel, using specialized equipment and safety protocols for underground operations. The tunnel entrance was exactly as Amy had described it in her journal. Investigators found clear signs that someone had worked to clear debris from the opening, and there were scratches on the rock walls where tools had been used to widen the passage. The tunnel itself was part of an old copper mine that had been abandoned in the early 1900s. Historical records showed that the mine had several entrances scattered across the mountainside, though most had been sealed or had collapsed over the decades. The rescue team's exploration of the tunnel system took 3 days and required specialized cave rescue equipment. The passages were narrow, unstable, and filled with dangerous gases in some sections. Team members had to wear breathing apparatus and maintain constant communication with surface support. The tunnels formed a complex network that extended for miles through the mountain, with multiple levels and connecting passages that would have been confusing and dangerous for inexperienced explorers. Approximately half a mile from the canyon entrance, the rescue team made a discovery that confirmed their worst fears. In a small chamber where several tunnels intersected, they found the bodies of Jake and Amy Brennan. The siblings were lying close together, as if they had stopped to rest and simply never woken up. Their remaining gear was neatly arranged nearby, and Amy's camera was still around her neck, though the memory card had been damaged by moisture. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment suggested that the siblings had died from a combination of hypothermia and carbon monoxide poisoning. The tunnel system contained pockets of dangerous gases that had accumulated over decades, and the siblings would not have had any way to detect these invisible hazards. They had likely become disoriented and overcome by the toxic atmosphere before they could find their way to safety. The discovery brought closure to the Brennan family's 4-year ordeal, but it also highlighted the incredible survival story that had played out in the hidden canyon. Jake and Amy had managed to stay alive for nearly 2 months in one of the most remote and challenging environments in the North Cascades. Their resourcefulness and determination had been remarkable, even though their final escape attempt had ended in tragedy. Dr. Novak, the geologist whose survey team had made the initial discovery, was deeply affected by the story. She had spent her career studying remote wilderness areas, but she had never encountered anything quite like the hidden canyon where the siblings had been trapped. In her report to the Forest Service, she recommended that the canyon be thoroughly mapped and that warning signs be posted in the area to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The investigation also revealed how easy it was for even experienced hikers to become lost in the vast wilderness of the North Cascades. Jake and Amy had made a series of small navigation errors that had led them progressively farther from their intended route. By the time they realized their mistake, they were already deep in unmapped territory with no clear way to retrace their steps. Sheriff's deputies who had worked on the original search were amazed that the siblings had survived as long as they did. The canyon where they had been trapped was more than 15 miles from their planned hiking route, in an area that had never been included in any search grid. Even if searchers had known exactly where to look, the canyon was so well hidden that it might have been overlooked anyway. The recovery operation required multiple helicopter flights to transport the bodies and equipment out of the remote canyon. The technical challenges were enormous, and the operation took nearly a week to complete safely. Every piece of evidence was carefully documented and preserved, including Amy's journal, which would become a crucial record of their survival experience. News of the discovery spread quickly through the hiking and mountaineering community. The story of Jake and Amy Brennan became a cautionary tale about the dangers of wilderness travel, but also a testament to human resilience and the bond between siblings. Their 2-month survival in the hidden canyon was recognized as an extraordinary feat of endurance and resourcefulness. The Brennan family finally had the answers they had been seeking for 4 years, though the knowledge brought both relief and renewed grief. David and Susan Brennan issued a statement thanking everyone who had participated in the search efforts and expressing their pride in their children's courage and determination. They also established a foundation to improve wilderness safety education and search and rescue capabilities in remote areas. The forensic examination of Jake and Amy Brennan's remains provided additional details about their final weeks of life. Dr. Margaret Foster, the chief medical examiner for Snohomish County, conducted a thorough analysis that painted a picture of remarkable endurance followed by a tragic end. The siblings had lost significant body weight during their ordeal, consistent with prolonged malnutrition, but they had managed to avoid serious injuries or infections that might have ended their lives much sooner. Jake's body showed evidence of the shoulder injury that Amy had described in her journal, along with numerous cuts and scrapes from his attempts to climb out of the canyon. His hands bore calluses and scars that indicated weeks of hard physical labor, likely from gathering food, building shelters, and working to clear the tunnel entrance. Despite his injuries, he had remained functional until the very end, suggesting a level of determination that impressed even experienced wilderness survival experts. Amy's remains told a similar story of hardship and perseverance. She had suffered from several minor injuries, including a partially healed ankle sprain that would have made walking difficult on the rocky canyon floor. Her fingernails were broken and worn down, evidence of the manual labor required to survive in their harsh environment. Most remarkably, she had continued writing in her journal almost until the end, demonstrating a commitment to documenting their experience even under the most desperate circumstances. The camera found with Amy's body became a crucial piece of evidence in understanding their survival story. Although the memory card had been damaged by moisture and could not be fully recovered, forensic specialists were able to extract partial images that showed the siblings' daily life in the canyon. The photographs revealed their makeshift shelters, the fishing traps they had constructed, and the various plants they had gathered for food. The images also documented the physical changes in both siblings over time, showing their gradual weight loss and the toll that their ordeal had taken on their bodies. One particularly poignant photograph showed Jake and Amy sitting together by their small campfire, smiling despite their obvious exhaustion and malnutrition. The image was dated August 15th, according to the camera's internal clock, nearly a month into their entrapment. Their ability to maintain some semblance of normal sibling interaction, even under such extreme stress, spoke to the strength of their relationship and their mutual determination to survive. The investigation into the old mining tunnel system revealed a complex network of passages that had been excavated in the early 1900s by the Cascade Copper Company. Historical records showed that the mine had been abandoned in 1923 after a series of accidents and declining ore quality made the operation unprofitable. The tunnels had been left unsealed, creating a hidden maze of passages that posed serious dangers to anyone who entered without proper equipment and training. Environmental testing of the tunnel atmosphere confirmed the presence of multiple toxic gases, including carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and methane. These gases had accumulated over decades from decomposing organic matter and chemical reactions within the rock formations. The concentrations were not immediately lethal, but prolonged exposure would have caused disorientation, weakness, and eventually death. Jake and Amy would have had no way to detect these invisible hazards as they made their way through the dark passages. The tunnel exploration also revealed evidence of the siblings' final journey. Investigators found footprints in the soft mud of the tunnel floor, along with marks on the walls where they had felt their way through the darkness. About a quarter-mile from the canyon entrance, they discovered a small pile of rocks that appeared to have been arranged as a trail marker, suggesting that Jake and Amy had tried to mark their route in case they needed to retreat. The chamber where the bodies were found contained several personal items that told the story of their final hours. Amy's journal was found open to the last entry, with a pen lying nearby as if she had been writing when she became too weak to continue. Jake's watch had stopped at 3:47, though it was impossible to determine whether this was AM or PM, or even which day it had occurred. Their remaining food supplies consisted of a few energy bars and some dried berries, carefully rationed portions that showed they had maintained discipline even in their final extremity. The discovery of Jake and Amy's bodies brought national attention to the case and sparked discussions about wilderness safety and search and rescue procedures. Experts analyzed every aspect of their survival story, looking for lessons that might help future hikers avoid similar tragedies. The siblings had done many things right, including conserving their resources, maintaining detailed records, and working together to solve problems. Their ultimate fate had been determined by factors beyond their control, including the hidden dangers of the abandoned mine. If you're interested in learning more about wilderness survival and the incredible stories of people who have faced extreme challenges in remote locations, be sure to like this video and check out our other content exploring the mysteries of the great outdoors. The Brennan family's ordeal finally came to an end with a memorial service held in Portland on June 15, 2022, nearly 4 years after Jake and Amy had set out on their hiking trip. Hundreds of people attended the service, including many of the search and rescue volunteers who had spent weeks looking for the siblings in 2018. The service celebrated their lives and their remarkable survival story, while also acknowledging the tragedy of their ultimate fate. David and Susan Brennan spoke at the service about their children's love of the outdoors and their determination to help others avoid similar tragedies. They announced the establishment of the Jake and Amy Brennan Wilderness Safety Foundation, which would provide funding for improved search and rescue equipment, wilderness safety education, and research into better methods for locating missing hikers. The foundation's first project would be the installation of emergency communication equipment in remote areas of the North Cascades. The hidden canyon where Jake and Amy had been trapped was officially designated as the Brennan Memorial Canyon by the U.S. Forest Service. Warning signs were installed at various points around the area, alerting hikers to the presence of dangerous terrain and abandoned mining operations. The canyon itself was closed to public access, both to preserve it as a memorial site and to prevent other hikers from becoming trapped in the same way. Dr. Patricia Novak, the geologist whose survey team had discovered the first evidence of the siblings' fate, continued her research in the area with a new focus on identifying other potential hazards for wilderness travelers. Her work led to the discovery of several other abandoned mine sites that pose similar dangers, and she became an advocate for better mapping and marking of historical mining areas in national forests. The case also prompted changes in search and rescue procedures for the North Cascades region. The discovery that Jake and Amy had survived for nearly 2 months in such a remote location led to extended search protocols and the use of new technology for detecting signs of long-term survival camps. Search teams began paying more attention to geological features that might provide shelter, and they expanded their search grids to include areas that had previously been considered too remote to reach on foot. Detective Raymond Walsh, who had continued investigating the case long after the official search had ended, felt vindicated by the discovery but also deeply saddened by the outcome. His theory that the siblings had ended up far from their planned route had proven correct, though even he had not imagined they could have traveled so far into unmapped territory. Walsh retired from private investigation work shortly after the case was closed, saying that the Brennan case had shown him both the best and worst aspects of human nature. The story of Jake and Amy Brennan became required reading at wilderness survival schools and search and rescue training programs across the country. Their journal entries and photographs provided invaluable insights into the psychological and physical challenges of long-term survival in extreme conditions. Experts noted that the siblings had demonstrated remarkable resourcefulness and teamwork, managing to stay alive far longer than most people could have under similar circumstances. The abandoned mining tunnel where they had died was permanently sealed by the Forest Service to prevent future accidents. A small memorial plaque was installed near the canyon rim, visible only to authorized personnel and researchers who might visit the site in the future. The plaque bore a simple inscription that captured the essence of their story and the love that had sustained them through their ordeal. The investigation officially closed on July 16, 2022, exactly 4 years after Jake and Amy had begun their final hiking trip. The case file was archived with a notation that it represented one of the most remarkable survival stories in the history of Pacific Northwest search and rescue operations. Their story would continue to inspire and educate future generations of wilderness travelers, serving as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the power of human determination and sibling love. The aftermath of the Brennan case led to significant changes in how wilderness areas were managed and monitored throughout the Pacific Northwest. The Forest Service launched a comprehensive survey of abandoned mining sites in national forests, identifying dozens of locations that posed similar hazards to hikers and outdoor enthusiasts. Many of these sites were previously unknown to modern authorities, having been lost to bureaucratic oversight and the passage of time since the early mining boom of the 20th century. The survey revealed a disturbing pattern of dangerous conditions that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. Unstable tunnel entrances, toxic gas accumulations, and unmarked vertical shafts created a network of potential death traps scattered across thousands of square miles of wilderness. The Jake and Amy Brennan Wilderness Safety Foundation provided crucial funding for this survey work, turning their tragedy into a force for preventing future accidents. One of the most significant discoveries during the expanded survey was another hidden canyon system located approximately 30 miles south of where the Brennan siblings had been found. This canyon contained evidence of at least 2 other missing persons cases from previous decades, including personal items and human remains that had never been connected to specific disappearances. The discovery suggested that the problem of hikers becoming trapped in remote geological features was far more widespread than anyone had previously realized. The investigation into these additional cases was led by a joint task force that included federal agents, local law enforcement, and wilderness experts. They developed new protocols for investigating missing persons cases in remote areas, emphasizing the importance of geological surveys and the systematic exploration of hidden terrain features. The task force also created a database of abandoned mining sites and natural hazards that could be accessed by search and rescue teams across the region. Dr. Foster's detailed analysis of the Brennan siblings' remains contributed to a better understanding of long-term wilderness survival and its effects on the human body. Her findings were published in several medical journals and became standard reference material for wilderness medicine practitioners. The research showed that humans could survive much longer in extreme conditions than previously thought, provided they had access to water and some form of shelter. The psychological aspects of the Brennan case were studied by researchers at the University of Washington, who analyzed Amy's journal entries to understand how people cope with prolonged isolation and life-threatening stress. The study found that maintaining routines, documenting experiences, and focusing on concrete survival tasks helped preserve mental health even under the most desperate circumstances. Amy's detailed observations and Jake's systematic approach to problem-solving had likely extended their survival time significantly. The camera equipment recovered from the canyon provided valuable data for outdoor gear manufacturers, who used the information to improve the durability and reliability of hiking equipment. The fact that Amy's camera had continued functioning for weeks in harsh conditions, and that some images had survived even after prolonged exposure to moisture, led to advances in weatherproofing technology that benefited countless future outdoor enthusiasts. The Brennan family's advocacy work extended beyond wilderness safety to include broader issues of emergency preparedness and family communication. Susan Brennan became a frequent speaker at hiking clubs and outdoor recreation events, sharing her family's story and emphasizing the importance of detailed trip planning and emergency protocols. Her presentations often moved audiences to tears, but they also inspired many people to take wilderness safety more seriously. The memorial service for Jake and Amy had included the reading of several previously unpublished journal entries that Amy had written during their early days in the canyon. These entries revealed her artistic perspective on their situation, describing the hidden beauty of their prison and her appreciation for the unique ecosystem they had discovered. Even in their darkest moments, she had found reasons to marvel at the natural world around them. One particularly moving entry described a morning when Amy had awakened to find the canyon filled with mist, creating an ethereal landscape that she compared to a fairy tale setting. She wrote about watching Jake skip stones across the small pools formed by the creek, and how his laughter had echoed off the canyon walls in a way that made her temporarily forget their desperate situation. These moments of beauty and connection had sustained them through weeks of hardship. The final report on the Brennan case, published by the National Park Service in collaboration with multiple agencies, became a landmark document in wilderness safety literature. The report detailed every aspect of their survival story, from their initial navigation errors to their final attempt to escape through the mining tunnels. It included recommendations for hikers, suggestions for search and rescue improvements, and proposals for better management of historical mining sites. The report also acknowledged the extraordinary nature of what Jake and Amy had accomplished during their 2 months in the canyon. They had created a sustainable survival system using only natural resources and basic camping equipment. Their fish traps, plant gathering techniques, and shelter construction methods were analyzed and incorporated into wilderness survival training programs. In many ways, they had become inadvertent pioneers in long-term wilderness survival. The hidden canyon itself became a site of scientific interest, with researchers studying the unique ecosystem that had sustained the siblings for so long. The combination of fresh water, edible plants, and fish populations created a rare example of a self-contained wilderness environment. The canyon was designated as a research preserve, with access limited to authorized scientists and memorial visitors. If you found this incredible story of survival and determination as compelling as we did, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with others who appreciate true stories of human resilience in the face of impossible odds. The legacy of Jake and Amy Brennan extended far beyond their tragic fate. Their story inspired a new generation of wilderness enthusiasts to approach outdoor recreation with greater respect for the power and unpredictability of nature. Hiking clubs across the country adopted new safety protocols based on lessons learned from their case, and many outdoor education programs incorporated their story into their curricula. The Brennan Memorial Canyon remained closed to public access, but it was not forgotten. Each year on the anniversary of their disappearance, a small ceremony was held at the canyon rim by Forest Service personnel and family members. The ceremony included the reading of selected journal entries and a moment of silence to honor their memory and their remarkable survival story. The mining tunnel where they had died was permanently sealed with a concrete barrier, but not before researchers had thoroughly documented the entire tunnel system. The maps and safety assessments created during this process were shared with mining historians and safety experts, contributing to a better understanding of the hazards posed by abandoned industrial sites in wilderness areas. David Brennan, who had retired early to focus on the foundation work, often spoke about how proud he was of his children's courage and resourcefulness. He emphasized that while their story had ended in tragedy, it had also demonstrated the incredible strength of the human spirit and the power of family bonds. Their 2 months of survival in impossible conditions had shown that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when faced with life-or-death situations. The case file for Jake and Amy Brennan was officially closed on December 31, 2022, but their story continued to resonate with people around the world. Their journal entries were published in a book that became a bestseller, with proceeds going to wilderness safety organizations. Their photographs from the canyon were displayed in a traveling exhibition that visited museums and outdoor recreation centers across the country. The final entry in the official case file was written by Sheriff Deputy Robert Kane, who had taken the initial missing persons report more than 4 years earlier. He wrote that the Brennan case had taught him that every missing person deserved the same level of dedication and resources, regardless of how hopeless the situation might appear. He noted that Jake and Amy's survival story proved that people could endure far more than anyone imagined, and that giving up too early might mean abandoning someone who was still fighting to come home. The hidden canyon in the North Cascades remained a place of mystery and memory, a testament to both the beauty and the danger of the wilderness. The creek continued to flow through the narrow gorge, the walls still rose toward the distant sky, and the ecosystem that had sustained 2 young people for 2 months continued to thrive in its secret world. It stood as a reminder that nature could be both sanctuary and trap, and that the line between survival and tragedy was often thinner than anyone wanted to believe.